I'm
How have you
great.
been?
I'm great. It's been a hard week. You know what I'm saying? Had a lot of nonsense going on in the garden, but
That's rough, my man. What's going on?
well, I got to tell you, I learned a valuable lesson. A couple of them actually.
Okay.
Being in the garden, I'm a firm believer of being in there with your plant.
Absolutely.
Checking them once a week, or not checking them once a week, but monitoring them every time you go in there, checking them at least once a day. And I've been doing that, but I started using cloth pot,
Okay.
and
New.
we have a lot of ants around here. Now that it's getting cold, ants are coming indoors and stuff like that. And
Interesting. I haven't seen ants in a long time. We got like carpenter ants out here, but I haven't seen like regular schmegular, just like everyday ants.
yeah, these are like not carpenter ants, but they're sugar ants, are what they are.
The little tiny black ones, right? The little like
Yes,
yeah, it's like the normal house invaders, right? Yeah, we
yes.
don't have those out here. I grew up with those
Oh,
things. I haven't seen ants in forever.
lucky you. Because there's the thing about ants.
Yeah.
What ants do is they inadvertently carry aphid egg.
I did not
And
know that.
yeah, don't get me wrong. I treat my plants once a week. I
Okay.
treat them with an organic mixture that we'll have linked in the description here. But I treat them with an organic mixture consisting of some garlic oil, some capsaicin, which is the actual thing that causes peppers to be hot.
Yeah.
And it's basically an irritant. It irritates them and it just freaking makes them want to go away.
Like a fart in your room. I need to go in
Exactly.
there, but I don't really want to.
Yeah. You know that. So, but I spray this down, and the problem was I couldn't understand where these aphids were coming from. I was getting them, a little bit here and there, and I couldn't understand where they were coming from.
So the
Um,
correlation between the ants and the aphids is that you thought it was an ant problem bringing aphids in because you didn't know where the source was?
well, that's the thing. The ants historically, based on talking to my pest control guy that
Mm,
for my house, ants inadvertently carry aphid eggs on them.
okay.
And whenever you get ants in your garden, you may or may not get aphids in there. And if you're a grower, you know that aphids are super easy to get rid of with a little bit of treatment. But with the cloth pots, which I'm new to, I'm just now jumping on the bandwagon.
Right.
The cloth pot, I was treating my whole entire plant, treating the top of the soil, but what I wasn't doing is treating the cloth pot itself. With it being cloth, with my plastic pots, I wipe them down every other day. The cloth pots, I'm looking at them, nothing's on them. But the eggs are getting in those little fibers, and I wasn't
Okay.
spraying them down. When I happened to look at the bottom of one of my cloth pots, there was a circle of aphids on every single pot in that grow room.
Nuts, man.
And I had a couple of different choices I could make. Choice number one, start treating my plants and treating them like crazy, which has the opportunity to change the taste and flavor. Possibly, because I don't recommend that you treat your plants with any pesticides or anything like that, organic or not. It's not recommended as little as possible during flower, because that's going to change the flavor of your weed, and everything that's on there, you're going to be smoking. You're going to
Okay.
ingest. So, or I could freaking totally cut everything down and start over. And I opted for choice number two. I went through, I cut all of my plants at the soil, took the
Oh.
stalks, freaking took them, put them in the burn barrel, took my pots with the soil, took the soil, dumped it outside, took my cloth
Dang.
pots, put them in a bag to
Okay.
make sure that I contained the infestation, if you will. And again,
Mm.
it was an infestation not because we weren't vigilant, but because we didn't fully understand the new product that we were using.
I wonder if there's anyone else out there using cloth pots who have had the same problem. Have you like Googled any like forums or seen if anybody else has run into issues with the cloth pot?
Well, you know what? Talking to some people that grow, that have been using cloth pots for literally years. That is one of the number one things that you don't have to do with plastic pots. Is whenever you treat your plant, you want to go ahead and treat that pot. It actually gives it a benefit because of the material. It allows the pest control to stay there longer, so you actually have less treatment time.
Mm.
So it's a two-edged sword. You just got to remember to spray that cloth, and it's going to give you a benefit. You're not wasting, pest. You're not wasting spray,
Mhm.
because now with that spraying that cloth, instead of spraying them every week, you can go between 10 and 14 days.
Right. Just making sure that the whole thing's treated as opposed
Ex-
to, preventative treatment every single week or whatever.
And that's the thing. Most growers and most people that grow will recommend that you do something preventative at least once a week. A lot
Mm.
of times when you get pests in the garden that you can see, you're it's just the tip of the iceberg. For every pest that you can see, I go ahead and assume there's 10 more that I can't. So if I find one caterpillar, I assume that there's 10 more caterpillars in there. And I just start by individually taking each plant, setting it under a light, and getting me a crate, sitting there in the room and going over it leaf by leaf. Because
Mhm.
while that may take a lot of time, it's going to save me time and money in the future. Because as I get closer to harvest, those caterpillars are just eating more and more and multiplying. So the longer I go without treating them, the closer that plant is going to be to harvest before I have to cut it down.
Okay.
So, by stopping now, I actually save myself a little time and energy, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to coat that entire. I was going to use a bug bomb,
Oh,
a pesticide laced fucking poison, but I've actually found a better way. And going on some of the forums, talking to some of the growers online, and talking to some local people, I'm going to close it. I'm going to close both of my tents up, seal them up with all of the equipment in there. I'm going to
mhm.
close the air vent flaps. I'm not going to have the venting fan running, and I'm going to turn on the internal fan and sprinkle diatomaceous earth in there.
Whoa, okay. Because diatomaceous earth, usually that's a barrier.
Well, it's a barrier, but it will
Mhm.
also kill them.
What about eggs?
Well, what it will do is it will continue to kill them. Well, wait, let me make sure I get this right. It will kill them. It won't
Right.
affect the eggs, but it will kill them before they are mature enough to have more eggs. So
So
it
you're
will
stopping
prevent.
the cycle now, but
Exactly.
how long is it going to take for you to be able to use your tent?
It's going to take probably like the treatment time is, what I do is I take that, I lay down basically a lid of diatomaceous earth, and
Mm.
then I turn on my fan, my internal oscillating fan in there after it's all closed up, and I let it run like that for about 12 hours. Go in
Really?
there
That's
after
it?
the 12. Yeah, go in there, because all it's basically doing is taking that diatomaceous earth and that oscillating fan and just basically getting it everywhere it can possibly get. It's going to get everywhere, and it should, because you want it to.
Okay.
Because of its powdery consistency, it's going to go in your lights. It's going to get everywhere in any crack and crevice, and that's what you want it to do. Because in order for diatomaceous earth to work, bugs have to actually touch it.
Right. It has to come in contact with. Okay.
Exactly. And you want it to tack onto that exoskeleton so it can cut it up.
Right.
So that's the easiest way to spread that diatomaceous earth in that closed environment without getting a good even coating everywhere. It's turning on that oscillating fan with a lid full of that dust for 12 hours, and it's going to just whirl it up in there. You're going to want to unplug your fan before you go in there, because that stuff, it's not recommended that you breathe it in. It won't kill you, but it's not great for
It's definitely going to irritate something at minimum.
you. Exactly.
So,
And
see, now I feel like we're in a great age for growing, because tips like that you wouldn't normally be able to get or crowdsource, so to speak, especially when it came to growing, because growing used to be so underground. I mean, even now, most people who are consuming are strictly consumers and not necessarily growers as well. There's home growers, there's commercial growers, but I would say like a majority of people who are home growing have been home growing before it was even legalized. And those are
exactly.
the people that have all of the knowledge that is now being spread online and put elsewhere. But I feel like there's got to be a ton more tricks and tips that you've picked up, just because you are not only an original grower, I would say, like an old grower. You're also somebody who's gone through the steps, the actual process to be able to glean those types of tips and tricks yourself. So not only are we able to get tips and tricks from other people, there's still people like you who have the knowledge that there's more to come.
And that's the great thing about growing. To me, to a certain extent, growing is a lot like art and or music. And the thing is, as long as you know the rules and what the guidelines are, you can do anything inside those guidelines. You know, as long as my plant gets enough light, enough water, and enough food, there's people out there that are bonsaiing their marijuana plant.
I know, that's so crazy. That's such a trip, man. Who would think, like, I just like this plant so much, I'm gonna bonsai it. I'm gonna make it an ornamental. I'm gonna just have it to exist, not necessarily as anything useful. It's just something that I have to take care of in order to create this beautiful artwork. That's crazy. Like, to think of cannabis in that light. It's a totally different light.
Well, to be honest with you, I think it's a product, and don't take this the wrong way. It's a product of boredom. And what I mean is, you know, you have a person that's growing weed, or excuse me, cannabis for all you fancy people out there.
Well, I think I like saying cannabis but as opposed to weed, because I feel like nobody differentiates cannabis and hemp. Everyone just kind of lumps it all together. When you say weed, it's just like an amalgamation lump. You know, I like saying cannabis. I like saying the kinds. I like saying all of like the little things that are exclusive to the smoke versus the just usables. So I like that differentiation. I like being a nerd. Yeah, nerd power.
Well, that's the thing. And this is what I tell people. What I imagine is every time I say the word cannabis, I am one step closer to normalization.
Every time we say cannabis, take a shot.
Oh man. Do you remember?
Every time we say cannabis, take a hit.
Do you remember the 30 beer shots in 30 minutes?
It was 100. It was 100. I don't think we got there though. That was awful. That carbonation.
I have never thrown up so much foam in my life.
It was just like a hose. If you are gonna do shots of beer, which is just, I mean, 100 shots of liquor that's how you kill yourself. 100 shots of beer makes perfect sense because it's like a shot a minute, but you need your beer to be like flat tire. Fat tire, I feel like is a very decarbonated beer, or you need to have poured your shots in advance so that they're not like settling as you're just down.
Yes.
But I think I understand why it's shots of beer, because you just get so like full of gross. It is not. If anybody has done that challenge without puking, let me know. It wasn't even about being drunk. It was about feeling like you're gonna throw up. It was just like fighting back the
And that's the thing. And it's not, and you know, for all the people that are like, I can't believe they're talking about throw up. It wasn't throwing up. Okay?
It wasn't. It was
imagine if you poured a beer into a glass, and then the foam comes over the side. That's all it was. I just had to lean over the toilet and
we were the Coke bottle, and we added Mentos until we exploded. That is what that was. That is what that was. Sans carbonation.
It was just
it was a burp that released foam out of your body.
Yes.
It was insane.
I have never attempted that since.
I have not even thought about it until we talked about it right now. That was out of pocket. I completely forgot about that. That's crazy.
Oh man.
But now you have like the mixers and stuff, like the Moscow Mules by Cayman Jacks.
Yes.
That would be a perfect substitution for that. It still has carbonation though.
The carbonation. The carbonation.
It's I will drink. I will put a beer in the fridge. I will open a beer, put it in the fridge, and then drink it later and enjoy it just the same. I do not care about carbonation.
Now, you know, I'm the same way. But for me, it's got to be ice cold.
Yes. It has to be cold. I'm totally fine with it going flat. I don't care.
I hear all you Europeans out there in the comments talking, oh, it's supposed to be at room temperature. This is America. We're not even using the metric system all over the place. Some people are, but screw those people.
I actually ran into a group of people the other day where we had this exact same conversation. Somebody that always craps on the imperial system because they use the metric system was like, how many feet are in a yard? And I answered it, and then I was like, and he was like, oh, that's how many are in a yard? And I'm like, yes. And then I was like, but nobody really even like measures in yards, like unless you're talking about sports or
Yeah.
fabric. There is no like, or maybe lawns, maybe, but it's like there is no like day-to-day conversation that I have where I use the term yard.
But
I
like,
don't
I
use
get
that
it.
term.
I
Yeah.
get it. The metric system is based on 10 and this and that and the
It's
other.
all
I get it.
even.
I
Yeah.
get it. But this is America. We got to do stuff different than everybody else.
Ice cold beer.
Yeah, ice cold beer and stuff
Yards
that's not
and
divided by
feet and
10.
inches.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, back a brr.
Well,
The,
so I love talking to people like you, specifically about growing, because I don't grow myself. I know a lot about cannabis. I've read a lot about growing. I have practical, applicable skills that come from being a vegetable gardener, a flower gardener, you know, everyday other gardening. I feel like a lot of that absolutely translates. But when it comes to cannabis specifically, cannabis, nerds unite.
Hey-o.
Do I get a bean every time I say cannabis? Anytime we're talking about growing cannabis, there's something new, some little tidbit that comes out. And I know one of your mantras is always write down everything that happens with your garden. It's like fourth grade science fair project. You have to keep a journal. This is the same thing. This was preparing you to grow cannabis.
That's you know, if you can grow tomatoes or parsley or any herb, you can grow weed. And what I mean is you have a better chance of growing weed with your skills than someone who has never grown anything ever, goes and spends a shit ton of money and says, I'm gonna be a multi-bajillionaire and attempts to grow weed. Because I gotta tell you, it's a continuing journey because the technology's always changing. I've been growing weed, at a minimum for myself for over 10 years. And the technology is such a driving factor in the cannabis industry because there's so many things that you can do now that companies, corporations have the ability to do that high level research. I don't have the money to freaking make a research lab and figure out what hormones make plants the best.
Right.
But daggone Fox Farm does. So
Right.
and with that research, with that huge burgeoning research effort, there's
I did that on purpose. Go ahead. I want to watch you talk.
That's great. The thing is they can give me results and information that it would take me years to get on my own.
Interesting.
And that's one of the greatest things about weed, cannabis, if you will, is that there's always somebody who knows more than you, and there's always something new to learn.
Okay.
I can totally know cannabis back to front, but through the research process, which I'm thankful for, of large corporations, I'm able to freaking be years ahead of what I would be on my own. And the flip side of that is I have to read, research at least every week. I take at least 4 to 5 hours throughout the week and read about what's new in the cannabis industry. That's how much it's growing by leaps and bounds, from different nutrients to different lights to different freaking grow products that they found. It's an amazing time to be in the cannabis industry.
So for your aphid problem, you went to Google and you found a viable solution that was organic, that was a great alternative to what your initial intention or plan was, and you've got that sorted. What would you say is your top number one interesting tip or trick that you figured out on your own just from being a grower?
Step number one, take a $20 bill, go to the Dollar General and buy 19 bottles of peroxide. Reason being is because hydrogen peroxide is one of the few things that you can clean with that will not leave harmful residue. Now,
hydrogen peroxide.
Yes,
who would have thought? Who would have thought? You think cannabis, you don't think hydrogen peroxide. You think growing,
absolutely not.
You sure as shit don't think peroxide.
Absolutely not. But I will tell you, one of the things that I use the most, and no matter what I'm growing, and what I'm talking about is, I don't know if you've seen my black tomato.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen some of my stuff like that. Hydrogen peroxide is one of the best gardening and aquarium cleaners, by the way, which is where I actually got the tip from. You know, where I first got onto it, but because I didn't know people were doing that. However I grow, whether it be deep water culture, soil, ebb and flow, or in soil, the one thing that stays constant is I always use peroxide to clean.
Okay.
Because of its awesome property. One of the things that it does is it bubbles on contact with dirt
Okay.
or foreign substance. And what it does is it converts. Now, don't quote me on this. I believe it converts to oxygen as it converts.
So the bubbling is the creation of oxygen when it comes into contact with soil.
Exactly, or
Okay.
any dirt for that matter.
Okay.
It releases the peroxide releases the oxide as a result of that chemical reaction.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
And so there's nothing better that I can do for my grow area or my grow room or my plant than saturate it with that residue, which is oxygen.
Yeah, interesting. So how do you use oxygen, or how do you use hydrogen peroxide throughout the cannabis grow process? You know, what places are you using it throughout? Because you're saying buy 19 bottles.
Well, what I'm doing is a lot of times I'm not using it straight. I'm using probably a half to a full cup of peroxide in a gallon of water, and I'm using it in a spray bottle.
Interesting. Okay.
What I will do is I will spray it on literally every non-electric surface in my grow tent
Okay.
and wipe it down. That is one of the few ways that I can assure that, you know, random dust is not building up in there. You know, a lot of insects are so tiny you can't see them.
Right.
The eggs are so tiny you can't see them, and that
Spider
peroxide
mites.
will actually react with those eggs and a lot of times destroy them.
Interesting.
So everything from the plastic pots that I was using, my humidity domes, my plant trays, my any orifice or any surface that's non-electric gets wiped down. And I also wipe down very carefully. I spray on a rag and wipe down the surfaces of my lights. It's great for lights because when it dries, it doesn't leave a residue on the lint. I can
Ooh.
wipe it down with peroxide. It'll leave a tiny residue that I'll wipe off with a lint cloth. But people don't realize that one of the other things that is super important to your grow is the lighting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's such a huge debate on lighting. There's so many
Forget
different types of light. There's so many different reviews on types of light.
Forget about the type of lighting. Forget about the intensity of the lighting. Forget about how many watts you need per square foot. The
Right.
number one thing that people need to know about lighting is as your grow goes on, your light degrades. And what I mean is
Wow.
if you're using a metal, a high pressure sodium or metal halide with a bulb, that the light that it puts out degrades because that filament is wearing down.
Right.
Average life of a bulb is between 5 to 8 months.
That is
Don't
crazy.
touch the outside because you're going to don't touch the glass on it because you're going to decrease the life of that bulb. But with your LEDs, it's crucial that you wipe down the lint just from the random dust that gets built up in there, stuff like that, just to keep a clean lens. That's no matter how powerful your light is, if the lens is dirty, it doesn't matter. And
Right.
no matter how good of a strain of weed you have, if the light bulb that you're using in your grow is only putting out 50% of the light, you're only going to get 50% of the production.
Right.
So, you know, those are the
So
first
many
two things.
factors.
Yeah, those are the first two things that forget about everything else. There are a few basic things that you need to know. And one of the next one was try to keep your area as clean as possible. And
See, now that's one that's very interesting to me because when I think about prepping a space for starting my own grow, it's very much, you know, contamination is a huge thing. You know, do you create like a clean room space or do you have like special clothes? Do you, I mean, like when you have pets, you have contamination 100% of the time. When you have gardening that you do outdoors, if you have other people in the home that are coming and going, you don't want your grow space to be a highly trafficked place. You don't want to bring your animals into it. I had one guy that we were chatting with was saying that he brought chicks into he brought chickens into his space and they wreaked havoc on his grow. That
I'm all about nature and
but see,
togetherness.
as a gardener, as a gardener not of cannabis, specifically of other plants, chickens are totally free range. Go ahead, they're not going to mess up your stuff. They're
Yes.
totally a pest control and a constant fertilizer. And but specifically, there are so many things that are okay for other things, specifically for cannabis, absolutely not.
And that's one of the few differences where cannabis differentiates itself from other plants. And what I mean is, no one's trying to make their corn cornier. No
Mhm.
one's trying to make their tomatoes tomato. They're like, that's a tomato. Okay, cool. But with the growing advent of technology and the ability of the average person to produce a high quality product, the goal is to get the maximum flavor, the maximum potency, because it's just like the old Total commercial. Would you rather eat 10 bowls of cereal or would you rather smoke one bowl?
Right.
You know, that's the difference between your 28% and your 14 or your 18%.
Right.
Now, of course, there's different tolerance levels and blah blah blah. All you keyboard commandos in the comments, I hear you. But the thing is, cannabis is such an individualized thing. Everybody's individual experience is going to differ. That's the only thing I can guarantee you about weed, is that everybody's individual experience is going to differ because everybody is different. Fun fact, a third identical triplet is simultaneously the most copied person in the world and the only one of their kind in the world.
That's crazy. I like that.
Also, told me that.
Just like every individual experience with cannabis is unique, every single grow is unique. You're never going to get the same grow twice. It does not matter how many variables you do. It does not matter how many steps you follow exactly the same. There is no such thing as identical grows. There's something there's something very similar to identical results. The end results are the same, but you constantly have to make adjustments. There is no one formula that works.
Absolutely.
You could not copy step by step what somebody else does and get this. You have to make adjustments. Does not matter what you're doing.
It's one of the few times where you need as much information as you possibly can get, simply because anything and everything can go wrong, especially growing indoors, because you're making the sunshine, you're making the wind blow, you're making it get humid, you're making it get hot and cold. If it's going to do something inside that tent, you're going to do it. And the pressure's on you. If you make a wrong decision, it's going to mess you up. If you wait too long, it's going to mess you up. But unfortunately, like you said, every environment is different. You can use the same setup. If it's in a different place, you may or may not have different problems.
Elevation. Plant type.
At
your actual natural climate. I mean, it's like baking at elevation versus baking at sea level. There is a difference. Even though you're using the exact same ingredients, even though you're using the exact same temperature, it's not going to come out the same, just because there are forces outside of what you are trying to control that are going to make a difference on what you're trying to create. And that's the same thing with cannabis. And that is even in the same environment that you're growing in. And it's you doing the exact same thing you did the year before, or, whatever harvest cycle before. You're not going to get the same results if you use the exact same steps, because something is going to change. There's going to be something.
And that's where, like we were talking about before, that's where that written information comes in hand, where if I have a problem, I can go back and say, well, I remember I had that problem last year or a couple years ago, or I might have had that problem in a different state. But with my own little file of information, it saves me time, because I can get in there and be like, okay, what's the solution? And that's one of the reasons why a lot of growers that you talk to, they find one nutrient line and they stay with it the whole entire time they grow. They're not being stubborn. They're not being hard-headed. They stay with that line of nutrients simply because when there's a problem, they know how to fix it.
I get that. It's like working with the same tools when you're a mechanic. You have brands that
Exactly.
you trust for a reason because they've proven themselves. When it comes to something like
Exactly.
growing that already has 5 billion things that can go wrong, you don't want your nutrients to be one of them. And see,
And
that's interesting that so much emphasis is put on, like, something like a nutrient, so much like faith is put into that for specific labels, but I completely
yes,
understand why. I understand why. But then there's the people who want to do the organic growing with their own fertilizers and stuff. Have you ever tried to go that route? Have you ever had like the huge
I
mishaps where you're
haven't.
like, interesting?
Only because I'm not, even at the level that I'm at, I don't have enough experience in organic gardening. Because let me tell you, there's composting, there's Korean natural nutrients, Korean natural farming, or KNF, where,
Mm-hmm.
because first off, there's only so many elements in the periodic table. Okay,
True.
just because you buy it from the grocery store, it's not specific to the grocery store. Okay,
Right.
a lot of the nutrients that you're using occur naturally in nature.
Mhm.
And you can create those by composting, by mixing in decay, by stuff like that. And it's a science. Because I got to tell you, I have a buddy of mine, one of the guys that taught me how to grow when I first started out, the professor. He's actually super big into KNF. And basically, what it involves is miniature composting on a scale that allows you to produce the nutrients necessary to grow what you need. It's not only for cannabis, but you can do this to feed your vegetable garden, your herb garden. And because a lot of people that grow are not only growing cannabis, are growing their own food because they're smart and they're using a skill that they already have to help themselves. It's one of those things where I understand why people buy, organic beef and free range meat, because they have a certain standard of what they're putting into their body. And when you grow organic, you take control over the standard of what you put into your body. And don't get me wrong, it's a lot harder. You're going to yield, you may yield about the same, but it's going to be more work, but there's going to be more reward. The Some of the best cannabis that I've ever smoked or tasted has been organic. It has that,
Appreciate you, RYCOTV, for that buy your followers.
yeah. Shout out to the promotions people.
Banned.
Hey,
Ban
at least we're on
hammer.
the radar. I received last week, some of our first fan mail, I guess you would call it.
What method of fan mail did you receive this in? Was it electronic or was it snail?
It was electronic.
Okay. We don't have true fans until there's snail mail.
Okay. Because I was like, well, no, what they did, they sent us a blurb with the show playing on top of their naked
Oh.
people, just because I was asking people like, yeah, let us know that you're watching the show. So they freaking, yeah. I was like,
I appreciate the enthusiasm. That is awesome.
I do.
I would love to be voiceover for somebody's sexy time. That sounds awesome.
Oh, I that would make me all weirded out. 'Cause my voice sounds kind of weird.
I'm fine with it. You do what you got to do. Shoulder
Yeah.
Devil says, "Hell yeah, keep doing what you're doing."
Well, let us stop.
Not mad about it at all.
Oh, no, definitely not. But I tell you, one of the things that allows me to continue to be in the cannabis industry, to continue to grow, not only grow weed, but to grow with the industry, is that it's changing so much, as opposed to, let's take a
Back in
look.
the day.
Let's get in our time machine and go back to 1965. You've got a guy wearing crochet pants.
That is so cool. I want some so bad. I need to make myself some. Crochet pants are awesome.
That guy will get on that.
No. It would have to be something I would have to make myself, because there's no way that somebody else could crochet you pants. That would be something that you would 100% wear. Because crochet pants, that is some custom hell yeah stuff.
I have no idea. I'm going to have to talk to an expert. But
crochet pants guy.
We're back in 1965. We go to the guy with crochet pants to get a lid of weed for $5.
A lid?
We're gonna sit on this Afghan and some fluffy pillows, listen to some Pink Floyd and fucking woo. Maybe there's some girls in bikinis running around with body paint on.
Dude,
But
that sounds
now,
amazing.
most people are getting weed. What they're going to do is they're going to go to a retail location. They're going to talk to some experienced people behind the counter. They're going to ask for their recommendations. They're going to say, check this out. This is indicas are recommended for muscle and joint pain. So if that's your deal, you're going to want to try this. You're going to have a person that's going to help you. Whereas back in the day, all of this was not available.
And it was classifications of weed were ditchweed, brickweed, and fire.
Yeah, it's like my favorite time at the dispensary is when a person that's been smoking weed for 20 plus years comes up and says, hey, they come up and they need to get some weed. And I ask them, do you need an indica?
What are you looking for? Yeah.
And they look at me like, what are you talking about? Because that's my time to shine.
I think that's something that people don't understand about cannabis when they're smoking it now, why there are hype trains on strain, because that was how people knew what was good back in the day. That was the classification. People who had the strain were the people that you went to, and that was the only way that you knew that it was good or not. Oh, is this OG Kush? Oh, is this Afghan? Is this blueberry? That's how you were shopping before. And now the hype train for strains is just the new designer strain of the week, the flavor of the month.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And don't get me wrong, same. I'm not hating on support your local guy where it's legal. But you know what I'm talking about.
We are not encouraging illegal activities, but we understand how some people still have to get down.
and that's the thing. It's and I am super excited for the places, not only the places where it's going to become legal, but the places where it's already legal. More so for the places where it's going to become legal, because a whole new world of variety, choice, and cost savings is going to be opened up to them. The reason why your 70-year-old grandma doesn't want to try weed is because she believes that she's going to have to go and talk to the blacks at the jazz music festival and see if they have something, and it's going to make her all nervous.
The electric lettuce is coming for you.
Yeah. And the reality of it is
reefer madness.
Most times when you go into a dispensary, it has an almost casual pharmacy act. And what I mean is, the people behind the counter are some type of have experience. You're coming in there, you're going to get something a lot of times for some type of medical need. They're going to advise you. The only real difference is they don't have a white lab coat
or a specific government approved college degree that says that they can do that, or the ridiculous liability insurance. I mean, maybe that might be a thing for commercial.
When I first opened a dispensary, the way I hired people is if they out of the pile, I just hired the persons with the most felonies for weed.
Interesting. I like that.
Not because they were better than anybody else, but simply because that was the person that had the least chance to get a job anywhere else.
I appreciate that. But it's also like, that's your track record with knowledge of cannabis in the industry before it was legal. So you clearly know what you're doing, and you clearly have some kind of hustle. Maybe you're kind of dumb because you got caught so many times, but obviously you were doing something professionally because you were considered labeled as a professional. When in reality, you should have been a person who was able to run a business. Because that's what you're doing. You were running a business. You just weren't legally allowed to wait.
And cannabis is a business where, unfortunately, I don't care who you are or what you do. Unfortunately, the people with the most experience have the most experience with the police. As we go forward, as the laws have changed, it's getting away from that. But what do you think the guy that's 60 years old and has been growing cannabis for 40 years, how do you think that he got that experience?
Right? How there is no legal way that you could have experience before now. You can't say I have 15 years of experience in the industry without having done something. It's not possible.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, that's one of my missions, and our mission is normalization. And it's to show people that, hey, cannabis has come a long way. You have the ability now, when you walk in a dispensary, just like you would when you walked up to the pharmacy counter, you can say, hey, I prefer this taste. I prefer something that's fruity, but I also have back pain. Do you have something that can help me? That,
you can even
quote
go as
unquote,
deep as like your experience with specific strains with terpenes. With you can
exactly.
pick out something like Blue Dream, figure out, and I mean the main terpene in Blue Dream is pretty common across most cannabis. But you could say, I've really loved this one. This is the profile that it has specifically. You can get into the terpenes, you can get into the cannabinoids that are accompanying it, you can get into how much CBD percentage it has. You can scientifically break down the strains that you enjoy and find similarities, especially when your preferred strain is out of production, or it's not the flavor of the week or whatever. People jump on hype trains, and when you think about it, if you prefer a strain, the best thing that you could do for yourself is try to grow it, because
Absolutely.
because production goes where money goes. So if your strain is no longer the strain of the week or the flavor of the month, and it was on the hype train like White Widow, Blue Dream, I feel like it's a pretty good standard one. But still, even something like Pineapple Express, there are some strains that stick around, and there are some strains that fade into obscurity. But if it's your preferred, the best thing you could do is try to get it and grow it yourself, to make sure that you do have a supply.
And what we did at the dispensary is, if we had regular medical patients that, for whatever reason, they found a strain that was, that took care. We had a young lady that she had MS, and the strain that helped her the most was Larry OG. We'd get it in a lot, but whenever we would get clones of it in, what we would do is we would save her a clone. That way she can freaking go. She has the ability to go and help herself, because unfortunately, I'm going to say this, and I've said this before, if you want to make money and that's what you're after, marijuana, the cannabis industry might not be for you, because for the most part, it's not based on.
As a grower, I would say, I think that there's niches inside of the new commercialized cannabis industry that you could definitely make money in. I would love to see people going to school to become growers, just like we have people going to school to become brewers. So we have professional brewers, we have professional brewmeisters. You have people that go to school for that. I would love to see that for growing. I would love to see, entrepreneur. I would love to see like viewerships or entrepreneurships that are, going to that and saying, hey, I need to learn how to do this because this is the industry that I'm interested in going into.
And I think that once we're able to start getting a standardized, whether it be a degree or a class or something that's accepted universal, I think that's going to be one of the steps that will launch the cannabis industry into the forefront. Because now, such as it is, there's maybe one or two places that you could probably say, yeah, I have a certificate from here. Like Oaksterdam University, you can take their class online. They have a set of course materials. It's going to cost you, I think the last time I checked is about $3,000. But they're not accredited. They're not, and I'm not saying that they're not good and they have standards, but there needs to be an objective way for them to have standardized stuff so everybody gets the same training. And when you can do that, I think you're going to have a lot of people that are going to look at that as a career, because realistically, like you were saying before, I can say that I have 10 years experience, but what if I have 10 years experience doing it wrong?
Absolutely. The experience does not always necessarily translate into quality. And I feel like that's up to the employer to determine, but like there is there are schools that are kind of like that, but I mean, like an actual in real life, if you told your parents as a kid, "Hey, I'm going to go become a grower in the cannabis industry," that would not be a real thing. I feel like maybe brewmeister wouldn't be taken seriously either. But when you think about being a brewmeister, when you think about being a grower, you know, you're going into some kind of microbiology or something, you know, that lends to that. I don't think you're necessarily be going to get a degree to become that, but you know, maybe something like a horticulture. If you told your parents a horticultural degree, they would be totally pumped. As long as that translated into something real world. We, you know, there's always the trope about society or in society now where it's like, oh, you're talking about getting a, you know, an arts degree. What are you going to do with that in real life? You know, something like this where it's a whole booming, you know, aggressively growing, you know, money making industry and in the billions. We're talking about in the billions, and all of that is translating into tax dollars that are eventually affecting everybody. You know, that beside, I think that we should be getting to that point in society. And actually, one of the most interesting things that has come up specifically related to that this week is I am part of a co-op, a local co-op for growing or for my electricity. So that means that we're all like part owners in this company, etc. But what came out specifically on the front cover of our magazine, it said it's a picture of cannabis. It's a picture of cannabis on our electric company's flyer that is talking specifically about how the grow company, because it's now legal here, how the grows are actually contributing to profit sharing for the co-op.
Absolutely.
When in the last like decade would you have ever expected your electric company to put out a magazine talking about how growing cannabis is helping your bottom line?
And that's huge.
That is just
well, I compare it to video games. There are colleges in the United States right now that have actual esports teams.
Interesting.
Okay. When I was a kid, if I would have told my parents that when I grow up, I want to be a professional video game player, I'm going to go to a college. They're going to have a team. We're going to go to other colleges. There's going to be Super Bowls. They would have laughed in my face.
If you said, I'm going to play video games at almost a professional level and I'm going to get a sponsor, or I'm going to do a scholarship and or sponsorship and be recruited to go to these schools in order to compete as this blah, 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 this sports team, they would have laughed in your face. There's no way that's not going to happen. But if you told them the same thing about football, oh yeah, you're going to be a football player and you're going to pay for your college. Oh, that's fantastic. You're doing something with yourself. You're going to go far. You know, you're still getting an education. No problem. But you say the same thing about video games and it's like, oh, I don't know. But now we have stuff like Twitch. Now we have, you know, like you said, an esports team that's in college. You have competitive actual sports.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
I'm like, how would you classify that? You have competitive something. I mean, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense.
My son-in-law told Auntie Kay that, hey, when he was a kid, he told her that he wanted to design video games. When he was getting ready to go to school, it was absolutely ridiculous at that time.
Yeah, it sounds insane.
Check this out. He's in Alabama right now working for a place that freaking designs video games. He has a degree as a video game designer, and he did this when he was 35 plus years old.
You call it developing now. You call it coding.
Exactly.
You call it something that's not, you know, it's not that term, but it is an actual viable thing that people depend on. When you're talking about billions of dollars, you're thinking like the movie industry. They use animation, they use graphic designers, they use all of that perpetually. There is such a demand for people who can do things with computers like that in the background, all of the coding, all of the actual written stuff.
The company that he works with, 2 years ago, they designed, not only do they design game, they design game, so they may design the graphics or they may design the sound, but they do a lot of freaking contract work for larger companies.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, they actually did the graphics for the helicopter simulator at Fort Rucker, Alabama.
Wow.
Yeah, he had to get a whole security clearance and everything.
That's crazy.
So, you know, his official title is technical engineer. And basically He has a couple of fucking huge monitors, and he's just
Mhm.
clickety clacking, freaking
That's a dream
doing
setup,
his
man.
thing.
Just some
And
monitors. Just
he absolutely loves his job.
that's a passion that's turned into something profitable with actual applicable education. I feel like growing should be the same way. Absolutely,
Exactly.
should be the same, especially when you're looking at how complicated growing is in a home grow setting. Multiply that by 300 plants, and you're looking for similar results for an entire crop. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
responsibility. That's a job. That's huge.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, you know what? You never hear a farmer saying, "Yeah, I rolled out of bed at 10 o'clock," because whether you're sick, whether you're hurt, whether it's raining, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, plant.
If you don't do what you're supposed to do daily, if you don't make sure that your crop is doing what it's supposed to do daily, there's something happening. I actually follow a local farmer who does like farm to table boxes. So you can sign
Oh,
up
kick
for their
ass.
produce packages in advance.
Kick
And
ass.
he does all of his stuff organic, which is interesting because he uses recycled plastic to take care of the weeds and the pests. So he actually
Okay.
has a setup that he does with plastics, but it's recycled plastic, which is
Kick
awesome.
ass.
And it's no chemical because it's like putting down barrier stuff, and I don't know, it's awesome. But
Okay.
he's up at 4:30 in the morning most days when
Yeah.
it's grow season doing what he
Yeah.
does. And it's just like I see he puts it daily on there, like what he's out, and it is wild. It is a
It
whole lot of work.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not easy. It's not super hard. But the fact of the matter is, you still got to be there and do it. You got to pull weeds. It doesn't
Yep.
take a college degree, but you still got to do it.
Well, it's like, it's almost like going back to a simpler time where if you want it, you have to do something to get it. So if you want water, you have to go to the well and you have to pull up the
Oh yeah.
bucket, and you have to figure out the most efficient way to use that bucket of water so that you don't have to do it 20 times a day. If people still had to go get buckets of water in order to wash dishes, I guarantee you they'd be using the sink method. Here's your wash water, here's your
Hello.
rinse water. That's it. I'm not going outside of
Yeah.
that well to go get that bucket of
Yeah.
water again.
Hey, a gallon of water weighs 8.5 pounds.
That's what I'm saying. And I feel like there are still purists out there with grows who do it that old school way. They're hand watering. They're not mass watering. They're
Yes.
not misting. They're not drip lining. They're not, inversion table, blah, blah, blah. They're not doing flood tables. They're doing hand water because to them, that is how you get the best out of your product. And I feel like
Exactly.
it's not necessarily better. It's, I'm a big fan of work smarter, not harder,
Mhm.
but you can't deny those results either.
I got to tell you, the absolute number one thing
Mm.
that nobody ever told me about growing. Forget all the other stuff we talked about. If you use this one thing, it will take care of everything else. At the end of the day, you will get out of your grow exactly what you put in.
Interesting.
If you dedicate the time and the energy, you'll get a great product. If
Okay.
you don't, if you're irregular and you're not on time, you're not on schedule, you're not keeping up with the cleanliness, you're not keeping up with the feedings, you're going to get a substandard product no
Okay.
matter what you do. And I sound like somebody's dad here. No, just like everything else you do, if you put a minimal amount of time into your grow, you're going to get a minimal product. If you get a good amount of time, you're hitting all the milestones, you're getting all the feedings, you're going to have a great product, barring Murphy's Law, of course. But it's one of those things where, I've seen people that are like, yeah, I'm going to get this grow. I'm going to set it up in my closet. It's going to be great. And they water it once a week, and that's all they do to it. They spend 1 hour to 45 minutes a week with that plant. Now,
Crazy.
they're only going to get that much out of it.
Mm.
It's,
I almost feel like there'd be no connection with that process at the end of
Exactly.
it. I feel like there's a lot of,
Exactly.
when you're doing a grow the way that I think of people traditionally growing, I feel like there is more satisfaction. There's more it's like when you're fighting a super hard boss in a game and you
Yes.
finally get it. You finally get that and you're like,
I cracked the code.
2 HP left, and you're just like, yes. Like I feel like that should be like the enthusiasm after every grow. And I feel like that's what
Absolutely.
has led into the great community that you have when you get into cannabis in general. When you get into that old school grower, people, when you meet those people, one love, it's what's mine is yours.
Absolutely.
It's, oh, let me have you sit down and try this out because I'm so proud of this. I want you to experience this with me. People who were willing to reach out and lend a hand and give you the tips and the stuff that you would only get from that kind of knowledge and experience. The people who wanted you to become a grower, who wanted to give you a hand up and get you into what they had
Exactly.
the passion for.
Because I got to tell you, a lot of cannabis is the culture, the
Mm.
welcoming, and I don't think we would have that same culture of cannabis if it wasn't illegal. If it was legal this whole time, if it was legal everywhere, I don't think it would be such an interpersonal experience. And what I mean is, I've never said, "Hey, I hate your guts. Let's smoke some weed together." Because at the end of that, we're going to be friends.
See, I think that is such a huge that we lost when we had the whole what do you call it? It's not legalization, it's the opposite of legalization. The
Um,
regulation, the outlawing of cannabis is
yes,
it was an integral part of human history. And I think that's something that we forget. The Polynesians carried cannabis seeds with them and brought them to
yes.
Hawaii and created the Maui Wowie strain because they were
Yes.
cultivators and they brought everything that they needed with them. And where did those seeds originate with the Polynesian people? It probably came from somewhere in Asia because that was the closest landmass where there was
Exactly.
actual land race cannabis strains there. And the people that were farming in America, they were able to grow because hemp will grow anywhere. You can make some bomb ditchweed throwing seeds out into a field and you can still
Yeah.
get the same CBD properties from a ditchweed plant that you would get. And
Yes.
that's what a lot of people used cannabis for originally, was medication. It was something
Yes.
homegrown that you could do. And all of the guerrilla like tactics of growing that existed with like these people who were the hippies, the hippie dippies, whatever, they were people who had information passed down generation to generation where people refused to abide by that kind of regulation and continue to grow. There are people out there like that who had generations of family members who grew. The indigenous peoples of the world had cannabis as something that they used as they were coming up. So it's crazy to think that right now we're finally getting back to a place where it's deregulated, or at least the regulation
Yes.
is coming in our favor, but we're
Yes.
still trying to correct that hundreds of years of normalization that we need to get back to. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's
Heavy.
it is. It is. It's
Growing is so much more than just what you have in front of you. It's so much more than
absolutely.
just going to the corner friend and picking up a gram. It's so much more than being
Yes.
able to walk into a storefront. Growing is so much more than that. There's so much more to it. There's so much more. Why are we talking
Yes.
about growing right now? Because this is the time where people start prepping their grows for, but and see, I don't know if that's like climatized, because there's people who do more than one grow, or who have perpetual grows, and I feel like you're one of those
Okay.
people.
You know what? Normally I do run a perpetual grow.
Mm,
But what I normally do, I run a perpetual grow indoors. I intermittently grow outdoors when the weather allows. But a
hmm
lot of people that grow outdoors, this is the time. This is their preseason. They're
hmm
compiling all their materials. They're setting up their space. They're getting ready. And even a lot of indoor growers, simply because the weather's better. You
hmm
get that springtime itch in there. And
hmm
a lot of people, like I said, even indoor growers, they still grow on the outdoor season, but they just grow for that summertime and that spring. And
hmm
for me, with a perpetual grow, it's a little bit more work to set up, but it's less maintenance along the
long
way.
term. Well,
I
because you're
don't have
looking at your own clones, you're looking at you're looking at not having a gap in when you can medicate as well, or
yes,
recreate if you choose.
yes,
You're looking at surplus that you can experiment with, because right now we're looking at getting recipes for mushroom chocolates. We're looking, and when we
absolutely.
say mushrooms, we're talking about psychedelics. That's the kind of mushrooms we're talking about. We're also looking at recipes for baking with cannabis, so cannabis
Yes,
butter that's appropriate. or for recipes, you're looking at infusions, oils, you're looking at tinctures, you're looking at gummies. All of having a home grow allows you to do that. And although you're investing a lot of cost upfront to get started, something like that, you're looking at long-term benefits. And when you have a perpetual grow, you're looking at a continual cycle where you're not having to invest too much extra money other than your upfront cost or your maintenance cost, as opposed to continually going to the dispensary and buying at different prices, maybe not getting the product that you're looking at. And that's not to say that you're not still going to the dispensary. How do you know what's
Absolutely.
new? How do you know what other strains you want to get into?
Absolutely.
It's all a part of it. Being able to grow
Yes.
does not mean that the cannabis industry or your local dispensary is going to suffer,
Absolutely.
but it is
Absolutely.
helping you.
Heyo. And let me tell you, I'm all about saving that money.
I'm still so sad for you for having to kibosh the plants, but I think it's really interesting that that was the decision that you made, because me hearing it, I'm like, that would it would be like a when I had to
Oh,
cut down a plant, like my boo
don't
boo.
get me wrong. Both of my testicles suffered a kick that day. But I will tell you this, in the numerous failures I've had in my growing experience, I can hold my head high as long as I maintain this one tenet. Every time I mess up, I must learn something. Otherwise, I've wasted my time.
Right? So, how do you feel about cloth pots now?
I feel just like a lot of things. Cloth pots are awesome. They allow your plants a lot of drainage. They allow freaking air circulation to the dirt and root. They're lighter. They're easier to store. But just like a lot of things, I think the thing that happened was operator error. And I
Okay.
want to make that abundantly clear. I've been growing for a long time, but I still do things wrong.
Okay. I think that
So
that's perfectly fine.
yeah, exactly. Because it's a learning experience. I try to make it to where every week of my life I'm learning something about growing to keep myself abreast. It's just like being a mechanic. When a new engine comes out, I got to learn about it. When a new regulation comes out, I got to learn about it. If I treat cannabis the same way, I can keep myself abreast of the most information possible, because no matter what, you are the one, especially with indoor growing. It's up to you ultimately to make the decision to do this or that. And that's what's going to determine whether you succeed or you learn a lesson.
So you took away from this where on your clot is a weak spot or a weakness or a
Yes.
hidden, not thought of before. So that's the lesson learned. What would you say is that's the specifics of it? What would you say is the
Yes.
overall reminder for as a person who grows?
The overall reminder is to get as much information as you can, because that's what you're going to rely on to make a quality decision regarding your plant. Because that's why nowadays not a lot of people are buying books, but what I recommend is that, especially with growing, you buy book, not because I want you to spend a bunch of money or make any money off of, but when you go to check your plants at midnight and the store's closed and nobody's answering your call, you have the ability, maybe not perfectly, but to answer your own question by doing a little research.
Interesting.
Whether your internet is down, you can have no electricity, you can still read a book.
True story. So what does your journal entry look like regarding this situation? Because you're keeping your information. Or is it just like big letters? Check the bottom of the pot, dummy.
Well, no,
what are
I
you
have a
writing in
specific
there?
format that I use.
Okay.
What I do is I freaking write what's happening, the situation, noticing aphids, noticing more than normal after continuous treatment. And then I'll go to, what are the recommendations? What should I do? That one I actually left blank because, to be honest with you, I couldn't figure it out until I actually was able to look at the bottom of those pots. And one of the reasons why I looked at the bottom of those pots is because I was continuously noticing that I was noticing more aphids. I got 3 or 4 days in a row, along with a couple of weeks back, I had noticed it. So I decided to investigate further because I kept on seeing the same thing popping up that shouldn't have been happening.
Right.
Once I did that, then I annotated, hey, aphids on the bottom of all cloth pot, or the action, aphids on the bottom, or what I found, aphids on the bottom of all cloth pot. And the recommendation was that I cut them down. And I always write in why.
Right.
And the reason why is because I would have spent more time and energy wrestling with those plants to get them under control, as opposed to starting with a new slate and knowing I don't have any bugs, as opposed to continuing and still having a problem.
So are you reusing the cloth pots or are you destroying?
I'm reusing the cloth pots, but what I am doing is I'm using one of those 19 bottles of hydrogen peroxide in my washing machine, putting it on delicate and dumping a half cup to a cup in there and actually freaking washing them on delicate.
Okay.
That way I know with hot water, I've destroyed any pest or anything in those cloth pots.
You know that
So-
aphids, I mean, that's going to at least wash away the eggs. I mean, that's why aphids lay eggs on the bottom side of plant
because they were able to duck away from the treatment, the pesticide that I was using.
Exactly. Well, and that's why aphids lay eggs on the bottom for any plant, is because the water will wash away their stuff. That's why they hang out on the bottom, is because they are not okay with water. And that's why when you treat undersides and top sides.
Absolutely.
And so washing is going to take care of those.
Well, let me ask you this. As a new grower, with all of the things that we've talked about, I know this is a lot of information to take in. And if you're out there listening to us now, we appreciate it. But this is a lot of information to take in. But as a new grower, a lot of the stuff, you may not even have heard of the stuff that I was talking about.
Right.
But if you remember this one thing, you will succeed. You will only get out what you put in. If you spend time to do the research on the strains, the location, what does best indoors, you're going to succeed, as opposed to, I'm just a guy growing some stuff. Let's do it. I'm going to be rich. That guy's never going to succeed.
Nah.
But you know what? This has been an awesome talk today. We've learned a lot of things. We've freaking talked about some grow issues that we've had. I hope that we've helped some people. I hope that people are listening. There's a lot of things that in growing, there's a lot of things that you can do. There's not a lot of things that you have to do.
You don't have to do anything. You can throw a seed out there and let it go, and you can smoke that if you want to. That's all up on you. But if you want to get quality product, this is some stuff you should listen to.
Exactly.
But
hey, we welcome all your tips and tricks. Leave them down in the comments. Let us know what your number one tip is. And hey, we'll see you next Sunday.
Also, the way that you find us here on Twitch is every Thursday we're doing smoke sessions. We do our podcast episodes every Sunday. You can catch us live here. We also have a YouTube channel it's linked on our channel, and we occasionally jump on here and play Fortnite. We'd love to play with you guys if you guys are interested.
Hey-o.
But you can catch us Thursdays and Sundays here on Twitch. And if you're interested, we have our links to all of our other stuff. We have a website. We've got merch. We've got a Facebook group. There are tons of ways to connect with us. We are also individual Twitchers.
Hey-o.
So, yes, as always, you should grow. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, hanging in there. We can meander, but always a good time.
Yeah.
You guys have a good one. And remember, you should grow.